Hello everybody, welcome to episode 18 of the Retro Rumble podcast. I'm your host for this episode, David White, and today we're going to be focusing on a very unique and somewhat overlooked survival horror game called Clock Tower, primarily the series, but more or less the early games in the series. And today's also a special episode because we are also introducing a new co-host, hopefully a regular co-host in Lauren, who recently joined the Culture of Gaming, and hopefully will be a regular co-host on the Retro Rumble podcast. So, Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Cool. And it's just me and Lauren for this episode. Usually you have three of us, but I think the fact that there's only two of us only indicates further that Clock Tower is a bit of an overlooked series because barely anybody at Culture of Gaming, had much experience with it, myself included, pretty much. But it is one of those series that I appreciate from afar. And I know of its uniqueness and that it's a very interesting game, so it's a very good topic to discuss. So, Lauren, what have you been up to this week? Been doing much? Been playing much? Game-wise? Or anything?
Well, I just got a Switch for Christmas this week, so I've been downloading games and trying out different stuff. I just got the Beat 'em Up bundle by Capcom, so I've been playing that today.
Is that so? What's that? It's like Street Fighter, King of Fighters as well? No, it's SNK.
It has Knights of the Round and some arcade ports, basically.
Oh, okay. I'm trying. What's the other Capcom fighter that I'm thinking of? I keep thinking of King of Fighters, but I'm pretty sure that's SNK.
Yeah, I think it is SNK.
Oh God, what's it called? Fatal Fury. Is that a Capcom game?
It might be. I'm not sure. I'm not as well versed in Capcom. I could open the game really quick.
No, it's fine. There's a bunch of sort of like I think Capcom had quite a few beat 'em ups, fighting games, I believe. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I might be confusing SNK games here.
I think they were like SNK and Capcom were like the go-to people for beat 'em up games, kind of in the 90s.
Yeah, certainly in the West. I would argue that probably in Japan, like SNK were, and probably still are, the front runners really. I mean, the King of Fighters series has been going forever. I think there's like King of Fighters 15 now. I could be wrong. There were so many of them that they had to start sort of numbering them by the year they were released. So we had like King of Fighters 2000 and 2001 and that. Oh, and there's also the crossover games as well. It was pretty cool. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a bit of an adventure myself. I recently acquired a new machine, and I know you've seen some photos of it, I hope.
Yes, I have.
We spoke about it a little bit, didn't we? Yeah. I recently picked up a wonderfully complete in-box Commodore 64, and it's a big major tick on my wish list. I've always wanted this machine, but I learned that it comes in quite a few iterations. The specific version I've got is, I believe, otherwise known as a 64C, or C64C, I guess. And I encountered a problem. And I found a problem that seems to plague a lot of Commodores, and that is that there is a memory issue, particularly with one of the DRAM chips. And in my research, so let me just go back a bit here. So a couple of games came with it, some very interesting games, some games based on British children's TV shows, which are pretty cool, like one based on Sooty and Sweep. I don't know if that made it outside of the UK, and Fireman Sam. I think Fireman Sam did make it outside of the UK anyway, and a bunch of other games. There's also a version of Nemesis, which I was really eager to play. Nemesis is a side-scrolling shooter, which is notoriously hard, so I was very interested to check that out. It looks good. And of course, no matter what game I loaded up, I got an error message, which was literally question mark out of memory. Sometimes it would say in 0. And in my research, I discovered that is a fairly common issue, and one of the RAM chips, although it doesn't really identify which one, needs replacing. So I couldn't really give it a good go. It booted up at least. I got to the ready screen and that, and I got to try and see if I could remember my basic 1.1 code, because that's the only computer code that I actually have some sort of knowledge of. Because I used to own an Amstrad CPC, and so it works to a degree. So now I got to go and get my hands on one of these chips. And there's all sorts of different versions of chips. The actual boards of the Commodore come in all sorts of different variations. Each version of the Commodore has itself several different versions, and those themselves have several different versions. It's a minefield. And mine is the assembly. I wonder if any listeners can help me out on this. Assembly 250469 version B, revision B. So I had trouble trying to find out which chips were actually the RAM chips, and I knew nothing about this stuff. So every chip I looked at seemed to have more pins than the ones I needed. So I checked again to see if the RAM chip I was looking at was indeed the RAM chip, and I've checked several times. It definitely is. Luckily, there's only 2 in the version I have. Some have like 8 different chips, so I only really got to check one of them, or try a new chip in both spots. But I'll have to get a soldering iron in order to get those off. So it's going to be quite an adventure. And if listeners want to see some pictures of the Commodore 64, I did post some on my Instagram, which is at level 80 Space Ninja, LVL80 Space Ninja. And I'm sure to be posting some images of me, with having to go at the internals of that machine as well. But it did give me a really good appreciation of the internals of computers, because when I opened it up, it had its board has this kind of gold look about it. All this kind of amberish kind of gold board with these gold traces running all over the place, and I just marveled at it. How technology has changed. It was just amazing that someone could design something like this. But we did. So cool. So that's what I've been doing. Quite an adventure. Do you have you have a Commodore 128, I believe, right?
Yep, I have a 128. I got it a couple years ago, and it actually runs perfectly. I haven't had any issues with it, but I do not actually have a disk drive right now. I've been trying to look for an affordable one that I can also modify with Jiffy DOS, which kind of makes it run a little bit faster.
Okay.
But faster than normal. So basically, Jiffy DOS you can put into Commodore 64s as well, so it makes it boot up a little bit faster.
Oh, okay. So games load faster, right?
Yeah. So any software, as long as it's in the machine itself and the disk drive, it's gonna make it load a bit faster, and it'll be just like butter.
Yeah, because I imagine one of the reasons why the Commodore and other similar micro PC, is there a micro PC? I guess it would be considered a micro PC. One of the limitations, of course, of the older computers is that games would take a little bit longer to load. Obviously, modern technology can make that a quicker process. So that's really interesting. I didn't really think something like that could exist, but of course it could. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've got a Model C2N dataset cassette unit, which is cool in itself. It's got like a little counter in that, which is quite stupid, but it's something I find really interesting because it takes me back to my own first micro PC, which is an Amstrad CPC 464 Plus, the nicer really color model, and so there's quite a lot of nostalgia in this machine for me. So. But yeah, games. Some games did attempt to load on my Commodore 64, but they did, they do drag the heels a little bit. And when they did load, there was all sorts of corruption on the screen, which again further confirmed that it is, at least I believe, it confirms that there is a RAM issue. So yeah, cool. So maybe you can help me out with my Commodore 64. I don't know. You probably. Well, I can probably say that you probably know more about the Commodore 64 and the machines in general than myself. But yeah, I definitely keep the listeners and yourself updated as I try to wrestle with this machine, because computers aren't really my thing at all.
Yeah, I'm big on the side of modifications and stuff, because I follow all sorts of people on Twitter and Reddit, and I'm just huge into modifying and trying to get the most power out of old machines that I can.
The only modding experience I have, somewhat back of the room modding, you could call it, because I used to work in this computer shop, and believe it or not, I did build computers at one point back in the early 2000s, back when there were jumpers on, or little things called jumpers on hard drives, designating which hard drive was the master and all that. So I don't believe that's a thing anymore. And so yeah, I was basically building computers from scratch, and also they were kind of running a kind of, like I say, like a back of the room kind of, back of the shop kind of operation, where they were chipping PlayStations, and I got well versed in doing that. Nowadays, I kind of have an aversion to it, because I don't really like modding machines too much, because I feel like I'm interfering with its intended condition. I want my machines to be as is, and obviously you can mod a machine to make it more, make it function better, and make it even look better in some cases. Or in the case of Super NESs and Mega Drives or Genesis, you can mod them so that they can play games from all different regions. I did actually have a Mega Drive that did that. Different pressing the power button halfway down or all the way down, or double pressing it, changed the region and the color of the light, which was quite cool. It would go from green to a dark red or a light red. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I can't mod, and part of it's because I'm kind of fearful that I'll wreck it. I don't trust myself with electronics or technology of any form. I'll replace things, I'll try and fix things, but as far as modding goes, it's a scary prospect. I don't want to wreck too many of my beautiful machines. So the website, cultureofgaming.com, has been up to some interesting antics. We recently, bang on Christmas in fact, published our latest normally top 25 list, but in this case we've actually gone for a top 50s list, and it's a top 50 weapons list, a video game weapons list. Did you happen to look at this, Lauren? Did you give it a glance at all, or at least see if you agree with any of it?
I have not yet.
Okay, well, I won't spoil it, but I contributed a few bits and bobs to that list, and it's a very, very cool list. Weapons from all over the place. So I do encourage readers to give that a read and probably tell us how wrong we are. Number 1 and number 2 are probably quite predictable, I reckon. Everything beyond that is quite a nice little mix of weapons from all sorts of genres and game series. So yeah, I was happy to contribute quite a bit, and a couple of weapons from my favorite series are on there as well. So cool, yeah. And of course, I'll add a link in the show notes. So let's continue then, and let's get to the Retro Rumble report, or the news segment. And so this first segment is a bit old, but Lauren, I want to get your view on it. Sonic posters for the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog movie were teased, and I think a lot of people thought they were fake, but then it became apparent that they were actually real, because some people didn't believe them. So are you a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, first of all?
I played it a little bit when I was younger. I didn't own a Sega system. I was mainly a Nintendo girl, but I had friends that owned it, so I kind of played through proxy, and it was definitely interesting. I don't know how I feel about the poster though.
Yeah, I suppose it's hard to have a view if you've not really played the games, but I think then again I would argue that even if you haven't played the games, you would probably look at obviously everyone knows Sonic the Hedgehog. Even if you've not played the games, he's an icon of video game history, so everyone knows what he looks like. And of course, Sonic the Hedgehog was kind of lanky and kind of muscular and a little bit freakish looking, and then his face was revealed later on, and he has these kind of black eyes and mostly blue fur on the face, and they went for a more realistic, more actual hedgehog-like face. So he had this sort of like wiggly snout and these beady black eyes. I mean, are you going to go see it? I mean, I'm actually very optimistic about it as a film. I think it's going to be good. And I'm a Sonic fan, but I'm not going to pretend I'm not. I was more of a Sega. I wasn't a Sega kid. I spent more time with Sega before I had a Super NES and later consoles. Spent more time probably on a Mega Drive than probably any other console, and still do. But Sonic is somewhat of a favorite of mine. So I can say that although Sonic does look quite odd, I'm optimistic. I just think it's because Sonic himself, as a pixel character, is quite unusual. He's got mostly round features. His eyes are kind of fused into one. To make that look realistic, as they were going for it, would have been hard. So they had to make some obvious choices that would make Sonic look very strange in the film. But I think people are focusing on that a little bit too much, and I think the film is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. And in other news, a recent long-lost, SimCity was intended to be released for the NES, and recently the long-lost version or prototypes of this game were unearthed. Two prototypes were displayed at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. And I think obviously they were snapped up very quickly, and they weren't really. It was basically intended for the NES and was cancelled. And Shigeru Miyamoto was very interested in making a city building sim, and he approached Will Wright, the SimCity creator, and consulted with him about releasing a version for the NES and the Super NES. The NES version was cancelled, lost to the ages, and the Super NES came out and it was perfectly fine. Though it is unknown why exactly the NES version was cancelled, but most speculate that it was cancelled because the NES was basically on its way out. So have you looked much into this, Lauren? Have you seen it? It looks good.
I wasn't too big into SimCity. It was kind of something that went over my head just because it was too complicated for me as a kid.
I can get that.
Yeah, even though I was over here playing Zork on my grandparents' computers.
We should do an episode on Zork.
Yeah.
We should do text adventures in general. I'd love to do an episode on that, with particular focus on Zork, because Zork is cool. So my introduction to SimCity was via the PC version, the original Windows 95 version, I believe, or possibly Windows 3.1, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it was 95, but anyway. And I remember it being very refreshing, very new to me, and a concept that I thought, of course, how has this not been made sooner? And it probably has been made sooner. I know that these world simulations or town simulations or city simulations go back way back to like the 70s and the early computers and that. I'm trying to think of the name of the what is considered the very first, but it escapes me. I think it's called Empire. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I didn't know there was an NES version at all. So when I first heard of the news of this uncovered prototype, I was skeptical. But having seen the images, the colors are obviously a little bit washed out. It's a little bit dull, really, color-wise. Some very dull reds and dull amber colors and navy blues and grays, and it's a little bit bland. But functionally, it looks perfectly fine, and quite a technical achievement to be able to squeeze something as complex as a city building sim into a tiny cartridge of the NES. So it is apparently available to download online. Whether it is okayed by Nintendo, I doubt. But it is out into the webosphere, and you can download a copy. So listeners, we would love to hear your views on that copy if you can get our hands on a copy, and I'd love to have a look at it myself as well. The PS1 Classic. Moving on a bit, the PS1 Classic has been released. Has only been on the market for 3 weeks. and if that, and has basically flopped already because prices have been reduced. I've noted that it's been reduced by over 30% for most places, but I've seen prices drop as far as 50%. Here in the UK, I believe you can get one for like something like £60. So it's safe to say that the PS1 Classic is a flop. Well, I mean, did you expect that long? I kind of expected it, to be honest.
I kind of did as well. I mean, it's hard to follow up the NES and the SNES Classic, just because those were such great hits. And Sony isn't really. I mean, did you hear that they actually use the popular emulator PC SX2 as their basis for emulating games? Yes, I heard a rumor that that's what they actually used.
I knew there was some sort of emulator, but I didn't realize they actually used a third-party one. I thought they would have developed their own in-house emulation, and that is really cheap. Oh wow, Sony.
Yeah, and considering it for a little bit. Well, considering for a little bit more, you can get from Stone Age Gamer, you can get something called the PSIO, which basically emulates disk drives. So it's kind of like a ROM cart for your PS1.
Cool. Yeah. I think one of the reasons why it failed was because of the lineup. I think, and also I think the PS1 games in general, they haven't aged very well for the most part. I would say 80% are probably playable because you're a fan of those games, like Final Fantasy VII, for example. Obviously, a huge game for the PS1. Is very playable because it's a great RPG, but visually it's ugly as all hell. It's not very impressive. The FMVs are very cool. They still hold up in my opinion. But the actual gameplay in the world it's very clunky looking and very sharp and jagged and very unappealing to the eye. Obviously, in its day, it was considered quite a marvel, and people obviously loved the hell out of it. One of the best-selling games on the PS1. I think it's like the 7th, funnily enough, best-selling PS1 game, I think. And yeah, so I think interest was already low. I don't think many people wanted it, and I think the lineup was pretty poor. Final Fantasy VII and Resident Evil 1 were on there. Outside of that, I can't think off the top of my head right now of any other game that was that much of a draw. I think there were so many other games they could have put on there, but I think they would have struggled to get the rights. Silent Hill would have been an example. I think they wanted to have a bit of variety, so they thought one survival horror, one RPG, or I think there was another one, wasn't there? And I think they tried to go down the route of having a game for every genre, more or less. So you had quite fairly obscure games like Jumping Flash and stuff like that. So yeah, I think if it had Resident Evil 2, it probably would have drawn a bit more sales. And if they straight up just had the top 20 best-selling games on there, just dumped them on there, Abe's Exodus perhaps, that would have been great. Then it would have been a lot more successful. I just think the lineup, people just didn't care. Yeah,
I know for sure the first Persona game is actually on there as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So again, that's a bit more of a cult game, though, isn't it? Would you say? I mean, later games in the series, I think had much more of a following. But I think early Persona, I think had more of a cult following. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think it definitely was more of a cult following for Persona, especially with the success with the later games. It's making people go back and relive how Persona started out.
I've always wanted to get Persona 2, Eternal Punishment, I believe it's called. It's quite an unusual looking game. I thought it was an adventure game at first, and kind of focuses on a serial killer, I believe, more of a detective adventure kind of thing. That's at least what I grasped from it. I've not investigated any further, but it's always one that's interested me. But it's an RPG, right? I'm starting to doubt myself here. It is an RPG, isn't it, Persona? I'm pretty sure it is.
It's a type of RPG. I know one, I think it's the third one that is really strange because how they get their personas is they shoot themselves, which is it's a very
dark.
odd concept.
No, it's quite interesting that because it's kind of like it's kind of, this is really random, but it makes me think of the dagger of Zion from Tomb Raider. Whereas
Oh, yes.
you have to have the willingness to basically plunge the dagger into your own heart to grant yourself the power of a dragon, really, a giant dragon. And of course, then one guy does, Marco Bartoli. Or as one henchman says it quite well. He says, what does he say? He says, the dagger will honor the heart of those who believe. Of course, if you're wrong, you're dead, right? You stab yourself in the heart, you're done. So it kind of makes you think of that. So it kind of adds that. What's the word? I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it kind of it adds a lot to those powers. It makes them look a bit more earned, I guess, for want of a better way to put it. But yeah, cool. So PS1 Classic was never really on my radar. Generally speaking, those small machines are a very cool idea, but I'm not particularly interested, to be honest. But I just think that if they had a far better lineup and just put the games that they were going to remake anyway, I know they're going to remake Resident Evil 2, and that's probably why that wasn't on there. But then again, they're going to remake Final Fantasy 7, and that's on there. So I don't know. I just think the lineup let it down. More games would have been better. I don't know why these consoles limit themselves to 20, 25, 30 games. I think the Neo Geo Mini has like 40 or 50 games. Just go crazy with it. Just have 100 games on it. Why not? Maybe give people more bang for their buck. You're basically paying £3 a game, in a way, aren't you? So, and you can do that on Steam or whatever. Yeah, I think it was a bit of a misstep, and that's it. In somewhat funnier, lighter news, a man robs a bank with a duct-taped NES zapper. Have you seen this thing? He didn't even tape it up that well.
Yeah, I had seen this in my newsfeed yesterday, I think, and I think it was in Mexico that he actually did this.
I'm not sure, but yeah. I just think it's funny. I mean, surely it would have been better to use a toy gun, like an actual toy gun, because of the shape of the NES Zapper. The NES Zapper is about half a foot long. It's a bit oversized. It's bright orange and well, the later versions was kind of like an orange red with grey. The earlier versions more of a grey. But he thought I'd cover it up in duct tape, and somehow he thought like an actual silhouette of a gun was enough. And that people wouldn't notice that he's holding something that's covered in duct tape. But apparently, he actually managed to successfully rob at least one bank. Apparently, whether this was with his zapper tool or whether he actually had something else, I'm not really sure. But it looks like it worked once, and I think he got a bit greedy and tried to have a go again. And I don't know what came of it. Whether people just went like, "What are you doing, dude?" You know, I can see that's a toy gun. I can see like the cut cable at the bottom. You can see the cut cable sticking out as well. He didn't even tape it up all that well. You can basically see like the orange underside just by the trigger itself. That's basically exposed. So yeah, just it's one idiot in jail. That's all that matters. And I'm happy about that he didn't get away with it, because what an idiot, what a clown.
Also the Japanese version actually was black, but when they brought it over to other places, they changed the color up so it wouldn't look as much like a gun. Yeah.
Or you could have used the Mega Drive laser phaser, which was very similar in shape and design, but was completely black. And I have one, and I can see right now it's even that is not convincing as an actual threatening weapon or legitimate firearm. It's still very clearly inspired by sci-fi weapons and such. So I just don't get it, because like there are loads of toy guns out there that are very convincing. Nerf guns even are more convincing than a zapper. So he was either very desperate and had very little money to even like buy a toy gun, perhaps, or he's very, very stupid. And I'm going to assume he's probably the latter. But yeah, well, I'm glad no one was hurt anyway. That's a good thing. So moving on. You're obviously familiar with Mario, of course.
Yep.
And one of video games' most prolific voice actors, a guy called Charles. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his surname right. It's either Martinet or Martinet. Is it Martinet? I'm assuming it's Martinet.
I think it's Martinet.
I thought so. Anyway, the voice actor of Mario has been awarded the Guinness World Record for voicing Mario for over 100 times. Although he pretty much says the same phrases over and over again, but it's still an achievement. He's still very prolific, and I think he's been voicing him for over 20 years, maybe more. Pretty much every game in this century, Mario, I believe. He got the 100th time he voiced Mario was obviously for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and that's, I mean, it's a definite achievement, and he's very talented. He does other voices as well. He does the voice of a dragon from Skyrim, I believe. I think it's Skyrim, called Parthenax.
Oh yeah.
Can't remember. Am I right? Yes, a dragon from Skyrim, right? And he provided his voice, or her voice, and yes, he's obviously very talented. So it's not just a case of him doing the same silly Mario voice over and over again. He's obviously a very talented voice actor, and it's a well-deserved record. But still, you know, I think it's more. What's cool is the fact that he's been doing it for so long. Not how many times he's done it, but for how long he's been doing it. Really, really cool. And lastly then, last bit of news, and quite nicely ties into our discussion of Mario and the PS1 Classic and the NES Zapper, really. Nintendo are ceasing production of the NES. This is kind of old news, I'll admit. They are ceasing production of the NES, well, they have really, of the NES and the SNES mini consoles. Once they're gone, they're gone. Because they were only really intended to cover the gap between the Wii U and the release of the Switch, just to keep that money flowing in, you know. So, do you have one of these at all, Lauren?
I haven't actually gotten one. I was thinking about getting one, and definitely my local game stores have been making it very difficult not to get one.
Yeah. Well, I would say same here, but actually, surprisingly, I've seen more PS1 classics than anything else, which doesn't really surprise me, actually. But again, they're not particular consoles that interest me, but if you are someone who would be interested in one, then I would recommend getting them now, because they've ceased production. Then again, they ceased production once already. I think it was back in July. I guess he was on the cusp of the release of the Switch. I don't know. I'm not sure. But they ceased production, and then due to popular demand, they thought let's just produce a couple of 100,000 more or whatever. And so it is possible, I reckon, that they could restart production, but I think this is more likely going to be it now. Because I reckon they're working on the N64 mini secretly. That's my theory. But yeah, once they're gone, guys. After Christmas, or after now, it is after Christmas now. At the end of this year, you know, that's it. They're gone. So now's the time to get one. And they're going quite cheap now, right? Aren't they like $50, if that?
I think so, around there.
Yeah. Oh, and just going back to the PS1 Classic, apparently it's very easy to hack. So get one of those, hack it, and check your own PS1 games on there. But you know what? They go for about £100, I believe. Prices have dropped, obviously. But even though they've dropped, you can easily get your hands on an actual PS1 and a good number of games that you actually want for what you could spend on, for what they're worth now. I've seen PS1s go for less than £10. I've seen PS1 games go for less than £1, or $1 even. So that's what I would do, and that's what I have done. Yeah, because frankly, I just prefer the original console. Do you think they'll do a PS2 Classic? That would be a good idea.
That would be amazing, but not if they execute it like this.
No, if they need a better lineup, definitely. But then again, the PS2. I was going to say that the PS2 has the largest library of all physical consoles, and the only console that comes close is the PS1. And it's also the best-selling video game console of all time, like over 150 million units. So that is the one console that would likely do very well, because it itself was incredibly successful. The PS3, the PS4 hasn't really even come close to the success of the PS2. So if they want to give it another shot, that would be the console to go to, and it probably will do well. But they really need to put some forethought into that lineup. I want to see Devil May Cry. I want to see 10. What else? Clock Tower 3. I want to see Resident Evil Code Veronica even. I don't know, Resident Evil 4.
Haunted Ground.
Yeah, just chuck a load of, like, just go crazy with it. Spend a lot of money getting those rights if they have to, if they don't already have the rights, and just get like 50 games on there, because they're still not big games, are they? I mean, PS2 games, file size wise, is 3 or 4 gig, if that. And that is if it's like a FMV heavy game, a lot of audio, a lot of music, and all that. Open world games and stuff like that. RPGs obviously going to be very big. You could get, like, there's no excuse for the amount of games they put on these things. That's what I do not understand. I know, I guess they don't want to spoil their fans or whatever. They don't want to fill it full of bloatware, I guess. But the thing is, the PS2 Classic and the PS1 and the PS2 had such an immense library that you could easily put 100 games on each console, and they'd all be absolute hits. So that's what they should do. Release the PS2. Get about 50 to 100 games on there, make sure they are the ones that people actually want, and maybe release it for the same price. I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, cool.
The big one would be the Silent Hill series, because the majority of the games are on PlayStation 2.
Yeah, 2 and 3 certainly come to mind. Of course, Resi 4, Code Veronica, a bunch of first-person shooters, Red Faction would be cool, Medal of Honor Frontline. There's so many games, like Manhunt. I could list all day. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I mean, come on. There's so many games that they could put onto that console and make it huge, because there's a reason why the PS2 sold so well. Its library was fantastic. So yeah, we shall see. All right.
Maybe they were setting up, like, testing the waters to see how the PS1 would do, and then set it up for the PS2.
Or they could be doing exactly what Nintendo are doing, and just basically bridging the gap between now and the PS5, because
that's true.
But obviously they didn't do a very good job of it. I don't know how it's affected Sony, whether this console has been a break-even adventure for them, or whether they've lost money. But I would wager they probably have lost money. Or it was such a simple little machine that they probably this probably was just them chucking a few bucks on the table kind of expenditure. They probably haven't lost anything, maybe a bit of respect, but they probably haven't lost much of. They probably haven't lost any sort of fans or any money really with this console. I don't think it's such a cheap little thing. Production as well is basically a hunk of plastic, isn't it? It's not a complex machine, and obviously they got that very basic emulator in there as well. It seems so. So I hope I would consider a PS2 Classic. I'm not kidding, but it depends on that library. All right, should we move on to question of the week?
Yeah.
All right. So listeners, this would be the second time we've done this. So if you are new to the show, we're introducing this little mini segment where I ask my guests and hosts completely dumb questions, hypothetical questions, and just for a bit of fun. So this question, I actually ask this question of a lot of people, just to sort of gauge how much of a kind of what kind of games they like and stuff like that. It's usually a good sort of conversation starter as well. So. It's a zombie apocalypse, but you get to choose, in order to survive, one video game character to accompany you, and one video game weapon to defend yourself. So, Lauren, who's your apocalyptic companion, and what is your weapon?
Let's see. There's just so many different video game characters that you can
some serious thought.
What's your decision?
Oh, I'll dive straight on mine. Okay, I like to think mine is quite tactical. So Physically, I'm not a super strong dude, so I need something with a bit of range. I need something with a bit of firepower, bit of power in general, and something that's very light and easy to carry. I also want a companion who is can really wipe the floor clean of enemies. Who can really be destructive, and has powers that also aid me in navigation and just in case I get a bit overwhelmed with hordes of undead coming at me. So my companion is Dante from Devil May Cry, because he himself has already dealt with hordes of bad guys. And you could argue that the marionettes from the Devil May Cry series, they're probably the first enemies that you fight in the entire series. Well, they are. They're the first. Basically, they are literal crash test dummies for your practice of mastering Dante's abilities and skills and stuff, because they are weak. They have some decent weapons. They have big, huge, basically. Kind of curved, almost like batliths on their arms in a way, and so they can be dangerous if they have a few numbers, but Dante lays waste to them. So Dante's already dealt with hordes of slow-moving, very kind of like very zombie-like creatures in the marionettes. So yeah, his sword can take out 5 zombies in one go. And if he's got Alistor, which I would like him to have, then he can basically enter Devil Trigger mode. He can fly up above the hordes of zombies and basically cook them with his electric attacks and stuff like that. So he can really be extremely useful. And my weapon, and I think this is a really good choice because tactically it's perfect, is Sam Fisher's SC20K. Obviously, a sword would be a pretty good idea too, because it's technically unlimited ammo, if you like. But I like to think that for my SC20K, I will have unlimited ammo, because it kind of has specialized ammo. So let's just assume that that's the case. Or I can make it, I don't know. So let's look at the weapon. So it's got a sniper scope. It's very accurate. It's very lightweight. Very comfortable to hold, and it fires alternative rounds. So other than being able to switch to fully automatic fire to lay waste to several bad guys at once, or human enemies, you never know. I could get raiders attacking me and all that. It's also very handy for taking out zombies at a distance. It's also got a silencer, so I can basically take out a zombie quietly if I need to. If I need to sneak into a building that's got kind of a few zombies wandering around, like a supermarket or whatever. And it's also got aerofoil rounds, which can knock things out. So if I need to knock out human enemies, I can do that. If I need to knock them out. I can also electrify water or enemies. So if I shoot a puddle of water with the electric rounds, I can basically zap a good group of zombies. Wait, it's got another round, isn't it? Oh, yeah, it's also got gas rounds as well, which is very handy for taking out rooms of enemies quietly. So yeah, there we go. I think I'd survive. I think I'd do well, especially with Dante. I usually let Dante do it all, really, couldn't I? But so what's your choices?
I think my choice, I would be, especially if it's undead, I think I should choose someone that is proficient at killing undead. Okay. People that come to mind would be like Trevor Belmont, or...
I knew you were going to say that. I had a feeling you were going to say at least one of the Belmonts. I don't know why I thought that. Cool, yeah.
Or maybe even Alucard.
Well, he's basically immortal, isn't he, for the most part? Zombie bite probably wouldn't do much.
Yeah, like nothing would really hurt him.
I mean, he's basically the boss of the undead, in manner of speaking, isn't he? So he's the incarnation of evil. He kind of rules. He basically commands the zombies. So he could probably control zombies, I would think.
Yeah, so that would be a great thing. And then for a weapon, I would choose the ability from Siren where you can actually see the point of view, because that would be pretty tactical in a close, like not a mob situation, but in when you're trying to sneak around and get past things without getting into the heat of battle. Yeah. You could easily get around quite a few zombies with that.
Yeah, I'm thinking like you could even be well, you know what? If it's an apocalyptic scenario, you can be as ruthless as you like. So I was thinking you could literally use other people as fodder for the zombies, if you like. You can basically like take over someone else's mind and basically use them to distract their whole horde of zombies, or basically throw them into a building to as a kind of remote viewer drone type scenario where you can or even take the mind of a zombie. I mean, technically they still have brains, right? So you could, in theory, take control of a zombie and use and not be horrible and take the control of a completely innocent human being like I would do. But you can take control of a zombie and use that zombie to scope out the area, and then you can say to Alucard, you know, there's loads in there. Do you want to go in there? Because it's only if it was a handful, I would sort it out. But there's like 100 in there. It's a shopping mall, so there's like literally 200 zombies in one area. So do you want to go and sort them out? So yeah, that's actually a really good choice. That's slightly better than mine. And you know what? I just suddenly thought, I completely forgot. The SC20K has sticky cameras. So that's quite handy for looking around as well. In fact, I could shoot one at a zombie, and then I can watch as that's through that zombie. So very similar in a way, but the only difference is yours technically is unlimited ammo, isn't it? And also you don't need to be too accurate. You basically need to look at a zombie, I assume. I don't know how it works in Siren, but I imagine you just have to look at a zombie or a person, and you know, do what you got to do to take possession of their mind or whatever. Whereas I'd have to be really accurate. Yeah, so I think you won that, really.
Well, yeah, also, it does depend on what type of zombies there are. Like, are we talking about Resident Evil 6 or Resident Evil 4 even, with super high-end intelligence comparatively with most zombies? Or are we talking like dumb, shambling around Night of the Living Dead type zombies?
Sure. That's definitely a consideration, because you got I put zombies into two categories very similar. I put them into Romero category, or what's his name? Boyle. Is it Boyle? He directed the 28 Days Later series, where the zombies technically aren't zombies. They're more enraged people, aren't they? But they're basically zombies, and they run like rabid, crazy animals. So that's a good point. Yeah, that is one. That is one fact. I'm going to say Romero, just because it might, it would be our weapons and our cohorts would actually work better in that scenario, I think. But then again, Dante is pretty quick. And again, he is virtually immortal. I don't think he could be turned into a zombie, because he basically has the soul of a demon knight in him, and he can fly and stuff. And yeah, so I think we both have choices of companions who can't actually be harmed by zombies, I don't think.
Yeah.
But if we are in a scenario where the thing is, just what I would say, your Siren is a great choice. But what if the zombies have already seen you? Like, what if you don't have a weapon to defend yourself? If you're in a scenario where Alucard isn't around, not that would probably happen, but let's just say you did. What would happen then? Though? Would you have to take possession of one zombie, get them to take out one zombie, and then keep literally possessing all these different zombies as they come at you, and hopefully you can basically get them to control them so that they walk off cliffs or whatever, or into spinning blades or whatever. I don't know.
Well, that's also interesting too, because in Siren, when you actually see yourself through the enemy's eyes, you can sometimes plainly see yourself. It does have like a glint that shows that it's your player character,
right?
But the actual enemy doesn't see you, so you're looking for yourself, but they aren't looking for you. You kind of thing.
Okay, I get that. All right, cool. I think we both survive. I think we do all right. If we teamed up, oh my god, if we teamed up as well, I'm there with my SC20K, you're there with your remote viewing, and you're basically your hypno skills, should we call it, and Alucard and Dante team up, and they're very similar in character. That's a fight right there, Alucard versus Dante.
But
assuming they would team up, Dante's not very one for work. He's very much a lone warrior. He doesn't work well with people, and that's very notable in the series. He's quite obnoxious, even in some cases, especially when he was younger. But then again, I'd like to think this is Devil May Cry 2 Dante, where he's a bit more grown up, a bit more mature, a bit more a silent hero. Far less brash in Devil May Cry 2. So I'd like to think it was that one. He's a bit more serious. He'd be willing to team up with Alucard, and actually we can just sit back and have coffee, and they can go do the thing, because them two would wreck the place. Awesome. All right, I like those choices. Listeners, we would like to hear your answers to this question. So yeah, in a zombie apocalypse, who would you choose as your video game character companion, and what would be your video game weapon? And of course, you can comment on I think you can comment on iTunes things. I don't know. You can comment in the Discord, on my Instagram even, and we'll put loads of links in the show notes, and you can give us your answers there as well, and tell us what you think of the news that we've gone over as well. And would you buy a PS2 Classic even? All right, so moving on. So our next segment is where I come in, and I'm going to look at some events that happened in the past here, particularly on this day. And I'm happy to say that all the historical happenings I think happened on this very day many years ago. So yeah, this is our video game history segment. And I'm trying to think of a name for it, but we'll just go with This Week in Video Game History. So, the first entry, 19 years ago, back in 1999, around about the time of the release of the Dreamcast, I believe. I'm not sure if it was a pack-in. Shenmue was released in Japan, first of all. So it might have been a pack-in with the Japanese Dreamcast. Have you seen that? I'm slightly off topic. Have you seen that pink Dreamcast? I think it was a Japanese exclusive. I've always wanted one of those.
I have.
Absolutely gorgeous, but obviously very expensive and not very region convenient. So yeah, beautiful thing. Japan got some awesome consoles. There's that black and orange N64 as well. Beautiful. Anyway, so Shenmue was released in 1999, 19 years ago today. So a bit of history on that, then, or rather a bit of story first of all. So on a November day, the hero of the game, Ryu Hazuki, was it Hayazuki? Anyway, arrives home just in time to see his father killed by a guy called Lan Di, and a man whose father obviously knew very well. Ryu attempts to stop Lan Di, but gets his butt kicked, nearly to the point where he's almost killed. And after recovering from his injuries, he sets out to track down his father's murderer, and as well as uncover family secrets and what Lan Di had, what him and his father had, what his father had. He recovers from his injuries and sets out to track down his father's murderer, and also uncover his family secrets and the mystery of the Phoenix and the Dragon mirrors that Lan Di seeks. So Shenmue is a hybrid game, and it incorporates elements of adventure and fighting with some light role playing. It's a 3D game, very much a open world game, very explorative. And much of the game involves Ryu talking to friends and various people around the town, hoping to find clues and hints and cues of where to go to the next step in the story. So any details Ryu learns are all nicely noted down in a notebook for future review, which I really like. I think RPGs in general don't do that. I always thought that was a really good thing, that every RPG should have just a simple little note taking device, or a book or something, because the amount of times I've played an RPG and come back to it and not have any idea what I'm doing or where I need to go, just to be able to write something in the game itself saying, or in any game for that matter, where I need to go next is super useful. I know games had actual booklets with notes pages in the back, but that's not the same. So yeah, and Ryu can buy items and from stores and try his luck with capsule toy machines and all stuff, and you can live in the world. And that's what's really cool about Shenmue, is that some people don't like it because they feel like it's a bit too much of a life simulator, that it's kind of a bit boring even. But I kind of like that. I think it really allows you to immerse yourself in the world of Shenmue and be almost a real person. I do real person things, like you can go to a store, you can go to an arcade, and you can play actual accurate versions of Hang On and Space Harrier in Shenmue. You can also play darts and pool. And Ryu, of course, sometimes has to fight his way through certain areas or people in order to get where he needs to go. And you can train Ryu so that he becomes more proficient in hand-to-hand combat, and you can do that by sparring or training, basically. Practicing over and over again the moves and stuff, and that's basically the role-playing element of the game. Now, the fighting system in the game is very similar to that of Virtua Fighter, with some of the juggling toned down, just to make it a bit more realistic, I believe. And if you train further, you get heightened reflexes, and sometimes during a cutscene, the player will have a moment to press a button displayed on screen to get Ryu out of danger, and these are essentially early versions of quick time events. And of course, failing to input the prompt is not always, it will sometimes kill you, but not always in the case of Shenmue. But it does affect what is happening on the screen. So what is interesting about Shenmue is that it went massively over budget. I think development was rolled back. It was intended for the Sega Saturn originally. And in 2008, it was awarded a world record for the most expensive video game ever. And at that point, that was at the tune of $70 million. And I don't think it even sold that well. I think it was a huge flop. I could be wrong, but I just generally don't think it did particularly well. So yeah, as mentioned, it was originally targeted for the Sega Saturn, and it went under the working title of Virtua Fighter RPG. So I'm not sure if it was meant to be an RPG with Virtua Fighter characters and it became something else. I'm not actually 100% sure. And the protagonist of Shenmue, Ryu, was actually based on Akira from the Virtua Fighter series. So whether he was meant to be the hero, I'm not actually sure. I'm sure if I did a bit more research, I would know. So yeah, the game was supposed to be quite longer than it was meant to be as well. It progressed into Hong Kong, and there was even a flashback sequence which involved a young Ryu. Is it Ryu or Ryu? I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's Ryu. Anyway, there was a flashback sequence involving a younger Ryu, but of course, due to the pressure to get the game out, it was already delayed and time constraints. They basically just shoveled it out, and that could be argued why it failed as well. Although some of the stuff that was developed for that version was later used in Shenmue 2. And it was marketed really cool as well. So during promotions in Tokyo for the original Dreamcast version, Sega used displays featuring actual forklifts, because you drive a lot of forklifts in Shenmue. And these forklifts basically lifted up giant screens and had like visuals of from the game. So yeah. So that's Shenmue. So have you played much of Shenmue, Lauren?
I have never actually played it just because I never had a Dreamcast.
Oh, I don't actually. Funny enough, I have Shenmue, but I don't have a Dreamcast. So I have it, and I've never actually played it. It's really frustrating because it's such a fascinating game. But I've seen like videos of it and gameplay stuff, and it's a very unique game. Let's just say that. Lots of driving around forklifts and basically just being a working man, just doing regular things and stuff. And as a storytelling device, all these like as a story, it's very realistic because it's not always about progressing the story. The story feels real because you get to live in this world and basically be this working man, and the story just progresses gradually from there. So again, that was one of the criticisms that people thought it was a bit kind of dumb, really, because they thought that nobody really wanted to do that. But it looks strangely fun, actually, especially the forklift stuff. All right, so going back even further now, going back 22 years this time, to 1996, Suikoden was released for the PS1 in the US in 1996. Do you have much experience in Suikoden, Lauren?
I mainly have just kind of a general knowledge of it, but I'd love to play it. It's on my list of games, but I just haven't had the time to go back to it.
Same here. It's a game that's particularly interesting because when it comes to RPGs, one of my favorite genres. It kind of appeals to the whole kind of the Pokemon style, gotta catch them all kind of thing, and I'll get to that why that is in a moment. So Suikoden is loosely based on a classic medieval Chinese novel called Water Margins. I don't know much about this book, but it is very quite. I wouldn't even say loosely based. It seems to be quite an interpretation of the novel, in fact. So it's a fantasy RPG set in an imaginary universe. I don't know why that. Its the main theme being a political struggle, and the hero of the game is the young son of a guy called Theo McDowell, a general who serves in the Scarlet Moon Empire. That's really cool sounding. Presently controlling the area that he lives in, a land called Torrent. And through a series of events, the hero becomes involved in a rebellion against the Empire, led by an organization known as the Liberation Army. And that's generally the gist of the story. So Suikoden has several unusual additions compared to other RPGs. There are 3 kinds of combat, which I find quite cool. A lot goes on in Suikoden. The most common one being the traditional turn-based party combat. Of course, players can have up to 6 people in their active party, and very much like materia from Final Fantasy, you've got magic runes which can be equipped on the player characters, which allow limited use of offensive and defensive spells. There are also army battles as well. Kind of, I think I believe it resembles the well, it doesn't resemble, but it reminds me rather of the of that moment in Final Fantasy VII when you're you kind of have this like this really random real-time strategy moment where you're playing by the city of Condor, is it, or Condor? Oh, what's it called? Well, there's a sequence where you basically have to command a tiny army defending these invaders. Anyway, so it reminds me of that. And but it's a bit more in depth. You get to play like units of fighters and archers and magicians, etc. And there's also one-on-one fights as well. And this is the coolest thing: the game allows the player to build and customize a castle, which serves as a base and is a fortress. And in the game, there are 108 characters that can be recruited. So rather than just like say again Final Fantasy, you can stumble upon these certain characters and you can add them to your party if you so wish, or they just become part of your party anyway. Vincent and Yuffie come to mind, but those are optional. But as you progress through Final Fantasy VII, you get other characters eventually. Well, in earlier Final Fantasy games, you get other characters coming along more often, I'd say. But in Suikoden, you can basically recruit 108 different characters, and they can all live inside your fortress, but not all of them are party members. Some of those are party members, but some are advisors, and some of them fortify the castle or the fortress itself. So yeah, Suikoden is right up there with Shenmue as far as games that I want to play. It is not one that I own, however, but it is one that is... from what I've seen, quite expensive. I think I saw a copy a while back going for about £120. And yeah, I can't afford to fork that out, I'm afraid. As much as I would like to, you're basically paying for £1 for every one of the 108 characters. The 108 characters are known as, what are they called? I thought I noted that down. I obviously didn't. They're called something stars. It's gone. Can't remember. Oh, Stars of Destiny. Yes, of course. That's what they're called. 108 Stars of Destiny. That comes directly from the Chinese novel Water Margins. And very lastly, exactly 30 years ago today, a arguably far more famous game and one of my favorites, Contra, was released in the UK. I think it was released a year before this, though, inside Japan and possibly North America. But 30 years ago today, in the UK, it was released for the NES. There's not much I can say about Contra, really, that hasn't really been said. It's just one of the most fun and one of the most arguably difficult platform shooters, what's probably most notable about it is that it's kind of popularized the Konami code. Are you familiar with the Konami code, Lauren?
Yes. I don't remember it, but everyone knows about it.
I was going to ask you if you remember. Yeah, it started in Gradius, really, and it was basically put in as a way for the developer to be able to progress through the entire game very easily by granting his ship all the power-ups, and so this ship was practically like so the game was still playable, and it still was a challenge, but it was very easy because you were basically super powered from the off. And in Contra, though, it actually granted 30 lives. And just in case anyone's racking their brain about what the Konami code is, it's up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A. Although it was in some things, there are some slightly different variations with select and starter added, or it would be A and start together. I think I've seen that one. But it almost always is, or it always is rather up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, something, or A something, you know. So yeah, Contra is really cool. Contra's awesome fun. Popularized the spread gun as well, and one of its weapons made its way into our top 50 weapons list. To plug that again. Yes, so that was released 30 years ago today in the UK. So
actually, I have a little side fact about the Konami code. You remember the kind of Castlevania spin-off Kid Dracula, right?
Vaguely.
Well, the Kid Dracula, when you input that into the game, a black screen appears with the Japanese text, "There's nothing here."
Okay.
The unofficial translation is "Sorry, that won't work." But yeah,
nice.
I think that's kind of interesting that they thought to put that in there.
That's a nice little joke in a way. It's a little hidden kind of almost like an Easter egg even. I think I was going to say I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something else then. Yeah, I think a lot of Capcom games it made it into, and it became kind of a staple. Konami rather, and also it made its way onto other things like websites were using it. I think it was on Facebook at one point that you could type it in, and I can't remember what it did. But it became so famous that like web developers were adding it to their websites, and even like non-gaming software had it. I think there was I want to say there was something to do with some Windows software had it, I think. So yeah, it became iconic in ways, which is funny because it was kind of accidental. It was left in the game. The developer didn't take it out. And then of course it was discovered, and it realized actually people love this stuff. People love cheat codes. I like cheat codes. Cheat codes are fun. I like the fun cheat codes. I don't like the cheat codes that give you things like God mode. God mode's kind of fun to be invincible, but it gets boring very quickly. Doom is a good example. Being invincible is that kind of well, being invincible generally would be fun, but it gets boring very quickly. Which probably tells you why characters like Alucard and Dracula are so indifferent and kind of cocky and boring, because they basically practically are immortal to a certain degree. So they're just bored with life. But yeah, like when you into the God mode when you into things like God mode in Doom, the only thing that's really cool that happens is that Doom guy's eyes go white, which is a nice touch. But again, you're invincible, you got all the weapons and maximum ammo or unlimited ammo potentially, I'm not sure. But I like cheats that are really dumb. Grand Theft Auto was a good example. Because there are some absolutely ridiculous ones in that. Ones where you can change the size of the tires to the point where they're absolutely ridiculous and they break. So they start clipping onto each other because they're so oversized, and also you can add the ability to jump with your car with an explosion underneath the car and stuff like that. Really dumb cheats like that are awesome. But of course, if you do use a cheat in Grand Theft Auto, you can't 100% the game. That's why I always create a second save file. Anyway, so I don't know about cheat games for our next topic. I wish I looked it up. I can't imagine there's many. I don't think many survival games have cheats, as far as I know. They probably do, but not quite so interesting as the ones in Contra or Grand Theft Auto, I imagine, but probably, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic, which is, or to our main topic rather, which is Clock Tower. And so I just want to know, obviously, some personal history here. I'm going to go first because my personal history with Clock Tower is quite minimal. I was introduced to Clock Tower back when I first had my PS2, and that was specifically Clock Tower 3, which I think many people were introduced to Clock Tower that way. Because I think a lot of people, when Clock Tower 3 was released, they probably thought, wait, 1 and 2. I've never heard of this game. I didn't hear of it at all. I was straight off the back of Code Veronica, I believe. I wanted another sort of survival game or something similar. And of course, I picked up Clock Tower. The front art looked a bit cheap to me. I flipped it over, looked at the cover, I looked at the screenshots and that, and I thought this actually looks very interesting. And I think it's because I didn't know the origins of the game. I think that led me to appreciate it more. But yeah, Clock Tower 3 was a game that I randomly picked up because the PlayStation 2 was a console that was my only console at one point, and I was just buying PS2 games constantly. This was back when the PS2 was released. The PS2 was the only console I ever bought brand new, straight off the shelf, because I had like this temp job, but I didn't have. I only paid my mother a little bit of lodging pay or whatever, so I had all this money left over. So £300 to me at the time didn't feel like a lot of money, or at least was money that I needed. So I walked into some electrical store, I can't remember which one, saw a PS2 and bought it. And then as soon as I bought that, I was buying games left, right, and centre constantly. I constantly wanted new games all the time. And Clock Tower was just a random purchase. Clock Tower 3, rather, was a random purchase. Didn't think anything of it. But I quite liked it. But we'll get to Clock Tower 3 in a moment. So that's basically my personal experience. I don't actually have much experience of at all in playing the early games in the series. So what about you, Lauren? You probably have a little bit more than me, perhaps, in experience. Or at least similar.
Mine is quite shorter. I actually found out about it in around 2015 when Nightcry was just starting to kick off and be crowdfunded and everything. And I thought this usually happens with games that are spiritual successors and things like that. Basically, I get the kind of itch where I need to look into the original game and see everything about it.
I get that. I so get that.
I just need to absorb everything. So I went and looked into Clock Tower. I watched a ton of Let's Plays of it. I cannot tell you how many Let's Plays I have seen of Clock Tower.
Probably more than you would actual gameplay if you had the game.
Yes, basically.
Yeah.
But and the ironic thing is I still have not played Nightcry.
No,
so the thing that kicked everything off.
Oh, really? Oh, right. Okay. So, you got a copy, but you haven't played it yet?
Well, the thing that kicked off my search into Clock Tower, I still haven't bought it, and I still haven't actually played it.
That's interesting.
I should grab it in the Steam sale because that's still going on. And honestly, why shouldn't I at this point?
Do you know what? I didn't even know it was on Steam. I thought it was just going to be on Vita, or I think it was going to be on phones or something, because it was a bit of an indie game in a way, wasn't it? They wanted to basically save on cost, but obviously it started as a Kickstarter, and then they rather than go down the big production studio route, they kept it indie and kept it cheap. So they didn't obviously launch it on standard home consoles or anything like that.
Well, they originally were going to put it on mobile phones, but the Kickstarter actually raised like over $300,000 when they launched it, that they went for a PC release.
Oh, okay. Well, that's even better for me, because now I'll be honest with you, my computer is garbage. So would you call it a resource intensive kind of game? I have to consider this every time someone mentions a game to me, and then it's on Steam. I have to really consider, will it run on my system? So from what you've seen or from what you know, would you say, 'cause I'm very tempted to right after this to get Nightcry and give it a shot? Would you say that it's resource intensive?
I don't think it is. I'm looking at the specs here. It seems like it doesn't even use a gig of video memory, so even a laptop should be able to run it.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I can slightly off topic, but I managed to get like Warcraft running on our laptop, so if I can get that running. That was actually a netbook, by the way. That's not related to my computer though. So my computer, I think, is more powerful than the netbook I had. So based on that, I might just give that a go later. Is it cheap?
Right now, just the game itself is only $10. It's usually $25.
Okay.
And if you want if you want the extras, it's $25 or $24.
Extras.
So extras would be soundtrack, art book, and storyboards.
Nah.
I think the storyboards might be interesting because that's kind
If
of
the art
gives.
book was physical,
Yeah, if it was physical, that would be good.
I'm all about the physical. You're the same, right? I assume. I believe.
Yes,
I hope.
I love physical copies of everything.
Absolutely, and sadly, we are at a cusp of technology where the physical media is looking like no longer a thing. Even Blu-rays are kind of fading out in a way, so that's arguable. But that's the sad truth, is that we are very much, future consoles are rumored to be download only, or at least non-physical. So I
Well,
love physical media.
Well, it also doesn't help. Like I have terrible internet, and
Oh,
that is what keeps me stuck into the realm of physical gaming just because it's better for me.
okay.
I
Once
only
you got
need
it, you
to
got it as
install
well.
updates. What?
Oh, sorry. I was saying one thing with physical, of course, is once you've got the game, you've got the game for good.
Yep.
Whereas digital is not necessarily forever.
And if you don't like it, you can sell it.
Yeah. Although I'm kind of weird like that. If I don't like a game, I still keep it. I'm looking at a couple of games right now that aren't very good, but I won't sell them. At least I've not
I
considered
made the
it.
mistake this was like when Shattered Memories for Silent Hill just came out, and I was terrified of horror games at that point. I gave it a try, and I got to the point where there were these like little pink guys chasing after you in one of the sequences with ice, and I was like, no, I can't do this. I'm done. And I sold it. But after like maybe 4 years, I'm like, you know what? I kind of really like horror games. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of was the same in a way. Like, I was very early. I seem to recall playing Resident Evil and realizing I had slightly sweaty palms because I was expecting things all the time. It was I was really sort of like tensed up a little bit. I was expecting things to jump out at me. It wasn't so much the horror; it was the jump scares and the anticipation of it. So yeah, I can totally get that. But no, that small pink guy thing that you mentioned with Shattered Memories, that just sounds annoying to me. So that's probably why I'd be like, nah, screw this, because it just sounds tedious.
Well, that was actually me when Remake for Resident Evil came out. I was just sweaty palms, just freaking out, like, what's gonna happen? Everything's gonna kill me. But the thing that got me to buy Silent Hill was because I had seen the psychological aspect of things where they're like, hey, it's going to change based on your answers in the game. And I'm like, that's such an interesting idea.
Yeah, Silent Hill was far. I mean, I mean, people always compare Resi and Silent Hill, but as far as artistry goes, musically as well, due to more specifically on the music side, Silent Hill is the superior game. Some would argue that it's superior overall. I would think Resident Evil just about takes it. But as far as story, an interactive drama, horror, Silent Hill does it so well. It's one of my favorite soundtracks. I actually saw the composer. What's his name? What's his name? The guy that composed the soundtrack for Silent Hill. I saw him live anyway a while back, which was really cool. Although there was a singer on stage singing a lot of songs, which I didn't want. I wanted just the music, so that was a bit disappointing. But it was still really cool to see him. So yeah.
Akira Yamaoka.
Yes, thank you. I saw him live, which is awesome. But again, it was ruined by the singer, frankly. Because when it comes to video game music, it's vocals aren't really the first thing you think of. It's just pure. I was going to say a cappella, but that's basically the opposite, isn't it? It's just there's no vocals at all. There's a word for it, but I can't remember. But that's what I like about video game music, is that it's they have to work, well, at least early video game music does. They have to work without the ability of lyrics or adding lyrics. So to be able to convey meaning, they have to use limited technology as well, so that's why it's artistically more impressive. But yeah. So anyway, Silent Hill as a piece of art is brilliant. Speaking of tension and sweaty palms, the series that we are focusing on does an extremely good job of creating that kind of tension. In fact, it's basically designed around that. It's kind of a game that arguably limits you to create that kind of tension, so that escaping and stuff like that is a lot harder. So yeah, anyway, so Clock Tower, very much an overlooked series, so much so that I'm talking about it and I've not even played it myself, apart from Clock Tower 3. So let's just give a brief little history of the entire series to date. So first off, it's a very unique point-and-click survival horror game. In its time, that was quite unusual and quite a bold choice too, because point-and-click, most people think of point-and-click when people think point-and-click, they think PCs. They might even think of mobile phone games in this day and age. But back in 1995, when Clock Tower was released, point-and-click was itself fairly uncommon even on a PC, but it was, as a genre, it was very much a PC thing. But Clock Tower began on consoles. And in 1995, it started with, of course, Clock Tower, and it was released in Japan only for the Super Famicom. And this was it's considered a bit of a progenitor and a paragon even of survival horror games. The earliest entries were created by Hifumi Kono, who would later go on to work on Night Cry, and it was developed and published by a Japanese developer called Human Entertainment. By the way, what do you think of Hifumi Kono's new company name? I've forgotten it actually. What was it? It was Naked something. Naked.
For
Naked
Night Cry?
Yeah, and for Night Cry, well, it basically the company that he left. Hifumi Kono would later leave Human Entertainment to create his own company.
It's Nude Maker.
Nude Maker, yeah. What? I don't. So strange. I'm sure there's a reason behind that name, and maybe it's a translation thing, perhaps. I don't know. It kind of suggests something, not something like making vulnerable, perhaps. So that sort of ties nicely into the idea of a horror game where you're purposefully made vulnerable. I don't know, but either way, it's called Nude Maker. Is his new company? But when he created Clock Tower, he began with a company called Human Entertainment. And later on, Clock Tower would be updated and re-released for the PlayStation 1, the PC, arguably the more fitting platform, and the Wonder Swan. Have you seen the Wonder Swan version of Clock Tower?
Has anyone really? Because the Wonder Swan is incredibly hard to even see.
Oh yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah, I thought you were going to say that it was hard. I thought you were going to say it was hard to come by, but no, I see what you mean. It's a very unusual console. Interestingly, it was designed rather confusingly. In fact, it was designed by the same guy who created the Game Boy, Gunpei Yokoi. Yep. And it was with the company that he left Nintendo to start. I believe I forgot the name of the company. Or Bandai, wasn't it? It was a co-development of Bandai and. Doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah. So you think, that it would have been okay? I think it was. I was going to say I think it was the first color screen with a later Wonder Swan color, but it wasn't. Anyway, so I see what you mean, but I love Wonder Swan. I really want the Wonder Swan just because it's such a curious little console. However, you are right. It's not the perfect screen. Neither was the Game Boy. I have many memories of being a kid, having a Game Boy in the back of a car, driving home from relatives late at night, and trying to play on my Game Boy with the passing streetlights going by, in through the window of the car, trying to light up my screen, playing games in stops and starts all the time.
That's exactly every 90s kid childhood, basically.
Although I did eventually get one of those completely over-the-top, badass lighting magnifying screens. Did you ever have one of those?
Yes,
just
I
a
think I
giant
still have
hulking.
one somewhere.
I wish I still had mine, because mine was kind of hacked. It had like was it hacked? I feel like it had a sort of makeshift plug-in option. I can't recall, but either way, the magnifying and the lighting was very useful. And would be useful on a Wonder Swan. I think I could be wrong here, but didn't the later versions, I think the Wonder Swan later versions, rather the Wonder Swan Color, I mean the Wonder Swan Crystal, didn't that have a backlit screen? I feel like it did. Anyway, the Wonder Swan version may not be easy to see, but if you can see it, it is quite a technical achievement, because they had virtually, if you imagine Clock Tower in its 16-bit glory, 2D side-on, just like any other game that was from the 16-bit era, pretty much. Take that, grayscale the images, and shrink it down to a tiny screen. You pretty much get what you get on Wonder Swan. The dialogue is they make full use of the game screen. I guess they had to, and the dialogue is actually located in the top left-hand side of the screen, kind of like it does in RPGs. In many RPGs anyway. So that was an interesting design choice, but as a technical achievement, it's actually quite impressive. Yes, so later on in 1996, by the way, that re-release was also limited to Japan.
And also, the Japan re-release, it was called First Fear, which when I originally looked into things, I thought that was a sequel. That's it. The First Fear is actually just the re-release.
Yeah. I thought I noted that down. My bad. Good spot. And then in 1996, Clock Tower 2 was released in Japan, in North America and Europe. It was a sequel to the first game and made the leap to polygonal 3D graphics, which is interesting because it doesn't look that good. And it was released for the PS1. Primarily, exclusively even. However, outside of Japan, it was the first Clock Tower game outside of Japan, but was known as Clock Tower 2 in Japan. So there are a lot of games like this. I hate to go back to Final Fantasy, but it's hard not to, because Final Fantasy suffered the renumbering plague, not plague, disease or whatever. And things get a little bit confusing. I'm not even sure if I have my information correct, because it was really quite confusing because of the renumbering and the renaming of things and the re-releasing of stuff. But yeah, so even though it made the leap to the PS1, it retained the point-and-click interface, and this would have been around about the time of Resident Evil 1. So, and a little bit after Alone in the Dark as well. So, what do you think of that? I find it really interesting that they actually kept the point-and-click interface in a polygonal 3D game. Granted, you can't really move the camera. The camera moves and it kind of pans and stuff like that, which is quite good. The camera follows nicely, but it would have been arguably a more fun game. The thing with the earlier games is that they were 16-bit and they were side-on, so point-and-click in that point-and-click adventure style works really well. But in the 3D environment, it doesn't work so well. So what do you think of that? Do you think they should have changed it?
I think that for what it was at the time, it was an interesting achievement, to say the
I would
least.
say that.
I can't think of many other games that have this type of style for a PS1 game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a very interesting choice. Again, just in general, point and click. It was already a bold choice for a 16-bit console game, non-mouse related game. Although you did mention a while back, it would be very interesting to see if it was compatible with the SNES mouse.
Actually,
forgot to look that up.
Super
Did you happen to?
the Super Nintendo version did not actually it did not work with the mouse,
Oh,
but the
that's a
PlayStation
shame.
re-release and Clock Tower 2 actually worked with the PlayStation mouse.
Do you think that would have made a huge difference with the series in general if they did that, if they made that built in, or even if they included some sort of mouse? Like Mario Paint?
It might have made a little bit of a difference because it definitely changes how you play the game. Whereas to access your inventory, you have to hover the mouse over the bottom of the screen, and to run, you just double click, and it just makes it
Triple click and quadruple click.
Well, it streamlines the game a little bit more than using a controller, but the problem is the problem is most people don't have a table where their console is. They usually had it on the floor.
I'm just trying to think of some sort of weird alternative, like perhaps a similar setup to modern day PlayStation consoles, where there's a touchpad actually on the console itself. That would have been quite interesting if they could expand upon that.
That would have been definitely really interesting.
So here's my view on the point and click style. While it's an interesting choice, I think it adds something. I think when you panic, let's just say you were being chased, right? And you get to your front door and you got to pull out your keys. You're gonna drop your keys, right? You're gonna panic. You're gonna struggle to get the key in the lock and all that sort of stuff. You know, it's always that case. In films, they always do it. People drop their keys because they're panicking. In Clock Tower, you're chased by a very famous, a great character who hasn't reappeared much at all. I really want him back. A guy called, labeled Scissorman because he carries around a gigantic pair of shears. In fact, there's a couple of different guys that carry around these shears, but they're referred to as scissors. Technically, they're shears. Because no scissors are that big. They're basically bigger than the guy himself. Now, granted, the guy that wields the scissors in the first game is a guy called Bobby Barrows, and he is 4 foot tall. And the scissors themselves are about 4 foot tall as well, which adds to it. Makes them look way more scary. So if you're one of those guys chasing you, and you have to move an icon to a certain door or something like that. Granted, clicking on the left or right side of the screen makes your character run, but and we'll get to that character in a moment. Having to click on a door or an item, I think it makes you panic, and it makes it makes you less dexterous, I guess. Sort of. You would. I think it adds to that element where you are trying to click on the weapon that would you'd be able to defend yourself momentarily with, or that door that you can escape through, or that bed you can hide under. Clicking on that with a mouse is a lot easier than doing it with an analog stick or a D-pad, even less so. So yeah. I think it's an unintentional, or maybe it was intentional. I don't know, but I think it adds to it. So it's interesting that they still managed to keep it for the 3D polygonal games, though. I personally think it still worked quite well, but they probably could have gone with something a little bit better, like maybe an ability to select something like an icon that would bounce around all the different options in the room. But I think selecting something in a 3D environment is, I don't know. I think they could have quite comfortably. I actually think if they jumped to a more Resident Evil style, granted they wouldn't be standing out so much. I actually think the game would have reviewed a bit better, and I think it would have been more famous now and probably still running alongside Resident Evil. You know. So that was Clock Tower 2, otherwise known as simply Clock Tower outside of Japan. Then in 1998, they released another game called Clock Tower 2: The Struggle Within. This centers around a character called Alyssa Hale, who had a multiple personality disorder.
Well, it seems like she's more possessed than has multiple personality, because when this other personality takes on, she has a purple hue about her.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I thought that was just for the cover art, but I didn't realize how literal it was. I thought it was just kind of like a reflection in a window, because the cover art features both the kind of like the evil ego personality rather, and the I guess you could say the good character personality, but the good personality looks a bit more stoic and a bit more harmless, whereas the reflection in the window looks a bit more menacing and has a kind of like smirk on their face, and it has a purple hue. So yeah, I see what you mean. It does kind of almost looks like she's been possessed by magic in a way. But that is interesting. Interestingly, though, that's what it was. It was released in North America only. It didn't make it to Europe, which I'm really sad to hear. And it was released in Japan under a very interesting subtitle. It was considered a spin-off, otherwise known as a Gaiden game, and which I think, if I remember correctly, is Japanese for side story. So you have things like Resident Evil Gaiden for the Game Boy and stuff like that. There's a bunch of Gaiden games coming from Japan. Anyway, so it was released as Clock Tower Ghost Head in Japan, which is a really interesting subtitle. I'm not even sure what that's even suggesting or what that even means, or whether that's some sort of mistranslation. Do you know why it was called Ghost Head?
I have no idea.
Do you think it's more about what you said a moment ago about being possessed, where there's a literal ghost in her head?
It
You know what I mean?
might be.
Kind of an English kind of a mistranslation kind of thing.
Yeah, like the most famous one where Guy from I can't remember what game it was. It was a fighting game. There was a character named Guy. He was actually gay in Japan, but they couldn't do that in America, so they changed his name to Guy.
They couldn't do it. Why? Interesting. I can kind of get that because people probably think like, you know, but you know, gay is not a common first name. But I find it sad that they would go like, oh, we can't call him that. You know, come on. Even back then. God. Anyway, so yeah, Ghost Head, very interesting stuff. But I think I've hit the nail on the head. I think it was like kind of like being possessed by a ghost, you know, being controlled by a spirit or a demon or something, some other entity. Trying not to spoil stuff here. Okay, so that was it for a little while, and then in 2002, 4 years later, Sunsoft and Capcom basically took over. By the way, Clock Tower 2 was Hifumi Kono had nothing to do with it. He had left the company by then, and I think, yeah, and basically, Human Entertainment got mired in debt and was shut down. Then Sunsoft and Capcom came along to basically kind of try and rescue the franchise, and of course, Capcom are very famous for creating the Resident Evil series. So naturally, they took the Clock Tower game concept and made it much more of a Resident Evil style, in fact, more of a Resident Evil 4 style game. And this is why I want people to check out Clock Tower 3, because if you like Resident Evil 4, you might be interested in playing Clock Tower 3. Because I think, yeah, I think, doesn't Clock Tower 3 predate Resident Evil 4? I feel like, I think it was Resident 2001? Resident 4 2001?
Let's see here.
It might be the same year, in fact, now that I think about it. Or oh, wait, no, I think it was 2003. Really go for it.
Resident Evil 4 was 2005.
Oh, okay, there you go. So yeah, it predates Resident Evil 4 by quite a bit. Although Resident Evil 4 is kind of labeled as this game that popularized that over-the-shoulder third-person, slightly off-to-the-side kind of technique, shall we call it. The Clock Tower 3 actually did it before. Yeah. But it's less shooty, shall we call it that. One of the criticisms of Clock Tower 3 was that it was a little bit too much action and not enough chasey, hidey. But anyway, Clock Tower 3 was released for the PS2, and many gamers at this point haven't even heard of Clock Tower. So most people probably were like, what is this? I have no idea. Where's 1 and 2? What's going on? And I think partly that's why people didn't play it, because they weren't familiar. They were already intimidated by the idea of like a story that's already 3 chapters in, shall we call it? And that probably was a bit off-putting. It didn't review too well, although I don't see why. And it kind of flopped hard. They changed the game, though. They omitted completely the point-and-click control, the interface, in favor of the more standard third-person pause and access your inventory that way, exploration controls, very much like Resident Evil. But what I like that Clock Tower 3 did, when compared to anything else, is that when you opened a door, the room that you were going into is already there. For me, that really adds a lot, because you don't know what's in there. So you're opening this door and you can only see so much. And I've always said that the scariest things in video games, in films, or even in books is what you can't see, or what you don't know, or what you don't understand. It generally scares people in general. Not knowing scares humans. We don't like it. In video games, we do it really well. I say we, I'm not doing anything. They do it very well. And in Clock Tower 3, I thought that really added to it. It kind of does it in other games as well, where you literally see nothing, but that's unrealistic. In Clock Tower 3, you open a door, and quite easily someone could be standing there. So, yeah, nice touch. Whether it was intentional, I don't know, but it looks more realistic anyway. It gives the sense of, it makes the environment feel full. You're not going from one box to another. You're opening one box and looking inside and seeing the other box before you go in. It's a nice touch. They went for the more Resident Evil 4 style gameplay, and it did not start the hero from the earlier games. It started a character called Alyssa Hamilton. Now, I only realised this later on, but Alyssa is obviously the name of the hero from the struggle within. And given the story of Clock Tower 3, it makes me wonder if they're connected somehow. Because it's been a while since I've played Clock Tower 3 fully, and there's very much a Castlevania lineage kind of storyline going on, like a lineage of heroes. So it makes me wonder if Alyssa Hale and Alyssa Hamilton are somehow the same person, spiritually, or genetically, or not genetically, but they are like the same person reincarnated or something. So yeah, and that was not developed once again by Entertainment. It was developed by Sunsoft, and Capcom completely changed it, and it bombed. So that's kind of that was meant to be a brief history, but it was brief enough. So let's go to the first game in the series and where it all started. Clock Tower, 1995. Now, you've only seen videos of this, Lauren. So have I. I did try my best to play it. I'm not gonna lie, listeners. I tried to emulate it and I didn't do very well. Couldn't do it. Don't know what happened. I would like to get a real copy of it, but it's obviously very hard to find a copy of this game. And obviously, it's very expensive. I've not looked up the price, but it's skyrocketed. So yes, you've seen videos of the game, Lauren. So what do you think? I think visually it's awesome. I'm just going to give a go on. Actually, go on. What was your initial impression of Clock Tower?
Well, it's an interesting art style. The first thing that I think of is the mode 7 that you see in the shower scene where you first find your one of your friends dead. And that's when you first find out, hey, something's wrong here. And this is also where you first meet Scissorman as well, because he starts chasing you once you find the body.
Well, I think actually it depends on where you go most of the time, doesn't it? I think that from what I've seen, that's one of the most famous first encounters. But I could be wrong here, but I think like it depends on where you go. Like there's always a first encounter with Scissorman.
It does change, and it can be different people at different times.
Or maybe that's it. Yeah, because naturally I've seen only videos, so I've seen someone else's playthrough. So it's obviously going to be slightly different from other playthroughs. That's kind of the beauty of Clock Tower in a way, is that you can go about it like many other games. And one of the reasons why so many other games are good like this is that you can play it through constantly, multiple times, and you can go about it in particular different ways because the game has 7 different endings. 8. So just to give a general overview of the game. So the first entry is simply titled Clock Tower, stars a orphan girl called Jennifer Simpson, who is very heavily based on actress Jennifer Connelly, perhaps too heavily, to the point where they could have been even sued, because Jennifer looks exactly like a young Jennifer Connelly, like a Labyrinth era Jennifer Connelly. And in Clock Tower, panic is a very important aspect. And panic can affect your character, can affect Jennifer rather, and it can also even kill her. I guess I don't know if it implies that she has some sort of heart attack or something. But I believe that is the case, because if she panics too much, she basically collapses down, and then you get your very famous dead end end screen, which I wonder if that is also some sort of mistranslation, because it's such a strange way to put it. Most people put game over, or you died, or the end, but they put dead end. So although that became kind of a word for that sort of area in a game for later games, like if you came to a room that was literally a dead end where you were kind of gonna die, that was referred to as the dead end room in later games and stuff like that, when games were designed to be very similar to Clock Tower. So Yeah. So what do you think of that character design? Do you think Human Entertainment should have got sued or something? Because Jennifer, she's even called Jennifer. She looks a lot like Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah, she looked insanely like her, and I had actually seen that it was mainly based on a movie called Phenomena, where it
Yeah,
actually had Jennifer Connelly in it, and it like even the plot line supposedly mimics it just a little bit,
it's quite similar. Yeah.
where you're in a mansion with your friends and stuff like that, and stuff goes horribly awry.
Yeah. We'll get to that later on, because that is one of Hifumi Kono's favorite films, and it's very much a case that he obviously wanted to make almost I would even say an adaptation of the film, potentially, but obviously tried to avoid completely ripping it off, because Clock Tower takes much more of a magical, supernatural tone, if anything. I've not actually seen Phenomena, so that could be very similar. I'm not sure. But from what I've seen, from what I've read, it's inspired certainly, but it doesn't completely rip it off, at least. But yeah, Jennifer Connelly's identity, visage is very, if anything, it's a very, very good 16-bit rendition of her. That icon in the corner, which goes from blue to yellow. No, goes from blue to green, I think, to yellow to red to indicate a level of panic, and I think it flashes green and red at one point. That is basically a what's the word? Kind of a mugshot, if you like, of Jennifer, and also her face changes. She also blinks as well, which is a nice touch. So
it almost makes you think of the Doom guy.
Yeah, because he kind of has his own tweaks and twitches, doesn't he? Looks around him,
and he actually degrades as you take more damage.
It's a great touch. I love that. That's one of my favorite things about Doom. So yeah, our story begins when Jennifer is adopted into the Barrows family, and if you're very, very familiar with the Clock Tower series, you already know things are going to go wrong from this. Do you know there was some massive debate about the name of the family, whether it was Barrows or Burrows, because in Clock Tower 3 they changed it to Burrows, and I think part of that was because Clock Tower 3 was set in London, so they kind of Englished it up a little bit to spell it Burroughs. So yeah, and also I think some people believe that it should be spelled Burrows or something like that. But from the versions I've seen and the versions I've seen played, it's Barrows. So I don't understand what the argument is about. Anyway, but yeah, people get into it over this. So anyway, so she's adopted into the Barrows family along with other children. Basically scissor fodder, from an orphanage called Granite Orphanage, located in Norway. Arriving at the location of the mansion, and after a bit of a hike as well, don't know why, but they felt the need to hike up this big mountain to get to the Barrows mansion. Obviously, kind of adding this importance to the mansion. So they hike up to this mountain, and they get to the Barrows mansion, otherwise known as the Clock Tower, because it has a gigantic clock tower sticking out of it. The tower, the actual building is called the Clock Tower, rather than the actual clock tower itself. It's very interesting. And so Simon Barrows, who is the head of the apparently likes to adopt children, so you can help them, allow them to grow up happy in his home, become good people, and then releases them out into the world to be whoever they want to be. But obviously that's not quite the case. And inside the mansion, in the main hall, once Jennifer and her orphan friends arrive, they are asked to wait while their chaperone Mary from the orphanage, I believe, or from the Barrows household, goes off to find Mr. Simon Barrows, who is expected to meet them there. And it's at this point then that the player takes control of Jennifer, and the focus icon appears, and the player can get to some pointing and clicking. And I've already mentioned this, but the first thing to note here is the art style. But I particularly like the character animation. I think it's really well done. It's a little bit robotic, a little bit could do with a few more frames of animation, but when Jennifer moves, like her feet and her skirt looks really realistic. Even when she turns, there's an actual extra couple of frames of animation, so you can see her turning, rather than her just sort of popping from a side-on view into a front-to-back kind of view. So it's a really nice touch. It kind of adds a little bit of depth, that I feel. So the art style is very foreboding. The main hall seems so empty. It's full of ambience. The whole house has this sort of very effective, uneasy, and I like to think of it as a very alone in the dark like ambience. Quite what's the name of the writer that Alone in the Dark is based on? Or at least oh god, what's his name? He wrote a lot of like macabre stories. People thought he was the devil incarnate. Quite a controversial guy. I might be confusing him with someone else. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so yeah, it's very foreboding, very dark, but still quite colourful. And so it's greatly inspired by the works of Giallo horror director Dario Argento. And as Lauren already mentioned, Dario Argento made a film called Phenomena. This is particularly a favourite of Hifumi Kono's. And it also starred the legendary Dr. Loomis from Halloween, Mr. Donald Pleasance, and of course a young Jennifer Connelly. So do you think have you seen many Argento films, Lauren?
I've seen I think he did Suspiria, didn't he?
I was going to say Suspiria. It made me think of Suspiria in a way, because Suspiria is set in not an orphanage, but a hostel, I believe.
Yeah.
Is it a hostel? And there's a school for girls. I forget. But it kind of made me think of that in a way, more so than Phenomena. I've not actually seen Phenomena, but it kind of made me think of Suspiria more, just because of like it stars a woman who arrives at this place and stuff goes wrong, and the colours as well. It's dark, but at the same time it's very colourful and very vivid, and I think that's very much a signature of Argento, where there's lots of sharp, dark shadows and vibrant colours at the same time. Not throughout his films, but particularly with Suspiria, lots of purples and pinks and greens and orange. And I got the feeling that Kono knew this. He knew this style, and in using this, he essentially color coded the rooms. Because did you get that impression? Because there was like the blue library or violet library, then there was the room full of dolls, which was blue, then there was the main hall, which was a kind of amber color, then there's another hall which is green. There's a kind of there's like a storeroom which is like this kind of pale green, I guess. No room felt the same in a way, with a few exceptions. Like a couple of the bedrooms were like a yellow color, but I felt like that was intentional. That's just what I think anyway. So at the point that the player takes control of Jennifer, this is when things get a bit crazy. So Jennifer starts to wonder, or the party starts to wonder, where Mary is, and when Jennifer volunteers to go explore and find Mary, or possibly Mr. Barrows, it's also at this point, if you notice, that the music kicks in. Again, very Argento, very Suspiria, in fact, very, very Goblin. Whereas a kind of, I would even call it John Carpenter-esque in a way, kind of like a tinkling kind of piano sound. And it's at this moment that kind of kicks in. Jennifer wanders down a hall, and then she hears a blood-curdling scream from the main hall. If you then return directly to the hall, you'll discover that the lights have been turned off, which is a nice touch, by the way. You can turn all the lights off and on in the game. And all of the fellow orphans have disappeared. And naturally, Jennifer thinks it's a prank. So, yeah. I heard that somewhere in this sequence, you can see a pair of eyes in the window. But I've tried so hard to try and see this. I've watched so many playthroughs. Have you seen this? Like one of the windows, I can't remember if it's the window next to in the hallway where you hear the scream, or whether there's the two windows in the main hall. But I will say this: there are lots of little touches like this in the series. Like even some of the jump scares, like this one with a cat, which I particularly like. Expecting like the Scissor Man to jump out, and it's a cat. Classic jump scare, the classic red herring jump scare. But they do it so well. The cat is a bit naffly animated, but it's a great little. I think it's the bathroom, one of the bathrooms you go into, possibly the same bathroom you mentioned earlier, and there's the box in the corner that rattles, and naturally you're expecting Scissorman, and I can't remember if you go to leave, the cat comes out, or if you go in, the cat jumps out. Wonderful, full of wonderful jump scares. There's even a sequence where, and this is where the supernatural comes in, where the first bedroom you get to, there's a mirror, and this is pretty much probably one of the first deaths for most people. Whereas if you look into the mirror, a hand jumps out and strangles you to death. You will die a lot in Clock Tower. It's not that sort of game. Yeah, and I think it frustrates people. Do you think it would be a frustrating game to play? It looks frustrating.
I think so. I think that it would be, just because there are certain aspects to the game where you need an item, and since there's no display to show you what things you can click on that contain items, it's hard to find. I know one that is notorious for people is there's this bottle of perfume in one of the bedrooms,
Yes.
and it is, I think it's actually by that mirror that kills you, and you need that to progress, but it's like there's no indication that it's there.
And there's no indication that it's important. It seems so insignificant as well.
Yes.
But one thing about a clock tower is if you can pick it up, pick it up. Although there are some cases where if you pick something up, you can die. Like I seem to remember cans of insecticide, and if you pick it up, I think Scissorman appears or Bobby Barrows appears, and I can't remember if you can escape from him or if you can. Oh, that's it. Yeah, if you throw the can of insecticide, it basically creates a gas in the room, and Bobby Barrows runs out, but you better follow him as well. That's kind of interesting, I think, because if you got to basically follow him in order to not suffocate. But yeah, the perfume. I will say, listeners, if you do play the game, get that, because you will need that. Because if you don't have that, you're gonna have a rough time later on in the game. In fact, you're gonna die because you need it. And Clock Tower doesn't care about that, because it doesn't even hint that you're gonna need this. It will screw you over so many times. So I can understand how it will be a frustrating game. But what you must remember is that it is a game the way you are expected to die a bunch. It is a trial and error game. You can get to the bad ending in like 10 minutes in Clock Tower. If you know where it is, you can even go. I would even say 5 minutes. I can't remember the requirements, but it's basically when you jump in the car and escape. It's a bad ending because you're basically ditching everyone. The idea is you're meant to be heroic and go and find out what happened.
And also, I think there's connotations that he follows you as well. And big connotations, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you would think that he would kill you. Another thing, I just thought about it with the jump scare with the cat. That is very reminiscent of something from Silent Hill, where there is a locker that rattles when you go to it, and there's actually a cat inside, and you investigate it. It stops making noise, then you go away, and it jumps out.
I would like to do a supercut of all the jump scares caused by cats in horror films. You know, there's going to be tons of them. That would be very interesting to see. Alien comes to mind. Even non-horror films, there's kind of like a jump scare kind of moment where a cat jumps out or something. Like specifically a cat. It's negative towards cats. Cats aren't that bad. Cats are great. I got a cat. Hey dude, he's sitting next to me right now, and he doesn't jump scare me. He trips me up a bunch. So what do you think of the music, by the way? I love that the music kicks in when Jennifer goes off to find Mary. It's minimalist, which is perfect. What do you think of the music?
The music is great. It's very atmospheric. It really does set you in the mood for the type of game that you're going to be playing.
Oh yeah, it's kind of. Although I mentioned Suspiria earlier and Dario Argento, it kind of, and I did mention John Carpenter, but it makes me think of more of how the music affects the mood in Halloween. If you take out that music, Halloween is actually not that creepy. But when you got that, it's got that kind of tinkling, kind of almost playful twistedness about it, and Clock Tower does very good, very good at that. Also, there's a lot of when the game boots up to this, you hear nothing but a clock ticking, which is very foreboding. It's just click, tick tock's great. Alright, so
I also had a thought. I didn't know if you knew about this, but with the different endings, you trigger them based on, like you said, you have to be heroic. So how many people you save. But the funny thing is, how you save these people is very interesting. Essentially, you just don't see that they die.
If you don't see it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, if you don't see it, it doesn't happen. As long as, like, if you hear the scream of the girl that's supposed to be pushed out of the window, as long as you don't look out the window and see her push, she doesn't fall out.
Yeah, that made me think of a question I want to ask is, as mentioned earlier, it's very true that if you don't see it, it doesn't happen. Very much a kind of what's that phrase where seen and not heard, or whatever the phrase is. I'm thinking of something else. I don't know.
Object permanence.
No, I was thinking of something far less interesting. What was that? I don't actually know what that is, but I see what you mean though, or at least I think I understood that. I don't actually know what that is, but yeah, it's very interesting. In many ways, it kind of says that you can if you mess around, if you don't get it together, you're going to kill a bunch of people. If you don't see it, it doesn't happen. That is what I'm basically trying to say. Now we are actually running over a little bit here, so I'm going to get to this next question, and I'm going to make this my last question. I really wanted to get into it a bit more, but what is your favorite Bobby Barrows encounter? I have mine already, because in many ways it was my first encounter from the playthrough that I saw. Do you have a favorite, even your favorite death, even because some of them are brutal. Some of them are genuinely horrible. Some of them are because you don't see anything happen, but you kind of get an idea of what did happen. Or just generally your favorite jump scare, your favorite horror moment, I guess you could say, from the entire series. But I'm going to say, if you can think of a specific Bobby Barrows encounter, because I have one which I thought was absolutely brilliant.
Well, mine I enjoy is there's actually a part where you can let a parrot free.
Oh, yeah.
If you let that parrot free and Bobby Barrows is following you and you hide under the bed, the parrot gives away your position and he stabs the bed, giving you no place to go. I mean, it would have been great if they instant killed you, because that would have been interesting, but they don't do that to you. They give you the chance to escape, but the way to get around that is if you either don't let the bird out, or you catch the bird in the blanket.
I like that touch.
But I
didn't expect that.
I thought that was an interesting encounter with him, that he can find you like that.
It's a very cool mechanic, yeah. What does the parrot say, by the way? Does he say something? As soon as he comes out of the cage, he's not doing something, and I can't make it out. It's like in here, or it's or something. I feel like I had a grasp of it last time I looked at it, but I have no idea what he says. But no, I do find that very interesting. That in many ways, it's kind of giving you a hint. It's like it's making you think before you exit the room, before you move on to your next objective or next area. You're going to think, I should probably capture this parrot, but how do I capture it? Bed sheets. I can't get it back into the cage, so I'll just wrap it up in a sheet and leave it there to suffocate, I guess. My favorite Bobby Barrows encounter, I think it's after the bedroom sequence where Jennifer re-enters the main hall, one of the main halls. There's two of them, I believe. And all of a sudden, there's a big circular colored glass window. I forgot the name of the type of glass, but big circular window in the ceiling. And Bobby Barrows basically falls through them, smashes through them in very, very dramatic style, and lands right in front of Jennifer. And it's only then you realize that he has landed scissors first, and on the end of his scissors is one of Jennifer's orphan friends. He's basically full on jumped down using her corpse as a means to land safely. It is absolutely brutal. So, listeners, I want to hear what you guys think of Clock Tower, or if you've even played it, and your favorite Bobby Barrows moment as well, of course. So do write in, comment on my Instagram, comment on the YouTube video. I want your views on Clock Tower, and any questions about Clock Tower even, because any questions you ask, we will very likely answer in the next episode. Hopefully I will be able to get a copy of Clock Tower myself, or even get a copy running on my computer and do a lovely Let's Play, because it's one of those games that you can play over and over again. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not a game that's too friendly, and it doesn't even try to be friendly. It doesn't even try to give you too many hints. It's designed to screw you over and let you learn from your mistakes. Well, not so much your mistakes, but learn as you go. It's a game of trial and error. So yes, do write in and tell me what you think about Clock Tower, and also what you even think about Clock Tower 3, because a very divisive game. I like Clock Tower 3. I thought it was a very good game. I just think it's unfairly criticized. And while it might not be very original, and it might be a little more combat based over the running and hiding, although there was plenty of that, I think it was still a very good game. Also, there was spiritual successes in Haunting Ground and Night Cry. I would love to hear people's take on Night Cry, because Night Cry was obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Hifumi Kuno's return essentially to the Clock Tower series. Although it isn't officially a Clock Tower game, it is a spiritual successor. It was known as Project Scissors when it started, so a very obvious nod to Clock Tower. It's such a unique game. It's a really good-looking game considering what era it came from. For a 16-bit game, it's so much detail in that art style. Fans of Dario Argento movies will love this game. Impatient fans of Dario Argento might not, because it's not a game for, frankly, impatient players. You need to replay it. You need to die a bunch in order to be able to essentially complete it, because there are multiple endings, and part of it's about discovering those endings and ideally getting the best ending. So dying isn't because you're bad or that the game is bad. It's just almost part of the gameplay. It's part of the mechanic. It's basically saying, try again, learn, and come back.
Dying is an incredibly good mechanic to games. I mean, look at the Dark Souls series. They use that as a mechanic to their entire game.
Very much, yes. I'm surprised I didn't even think of that myself. Yes, Dark Souls, if it is a game that doesn't even try to help you, as far as I know, I've not played it myself, but I know that it's notorious, very much a trial and error game where you can't go rushing into things. You got to think things through, and so does Clock Tower. So, Lauren, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. We are running out of time. Thank you for joining me in your first episode, and hopefully you'll come back for later episodes. How can listeners get a hold of you if they want to contact you or follow you, even on Instagram or Facebook or whatever?
Well, I am in the Discord. I also have a Twitter. I have YouTube, Twitter, everything. My Twitter is @snufflumpigus or @retrodork.
Nice, both cool names.
Yes.
And you have a YouTube video series, I believe, or am I making that up?
Yes, I actually have two. I have two channels. One is Retrodork and one is Snufflumpigus. Snufflumpigus is mainly modern games, and Retrodork is focusing on older games. I actually did a stream not long ago on a new FMV game called The Shapeshifting Detective, where the killer is randomly generated each time you play the game.
Random generation is not used enough in games.
It needs to be used more,
especially in stealth games. Slightly off topic, I know, but I always feel like things like that just aren't utilized in games enough. Rather than downloading DLC levels, just randomly generate a level every single time. As for myself, the best way to follow me is on Instagram. That is @level80 Space Ninja, LVL80 Space Ninja, and there I post most of my retro video game collection stuff and my adventures in collecting video games. And if follow the show and you are more interested in that, you can follow us on at Retro Rumble Pod on literally everything, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. And better yet, you can contact us directly and chat with us, even directly on the Culture of Gaming Discord, which will be linked in the show notes. Anything coming up? I know you've only recently joined the site there, Lauren, but do you have anything coming up for Culture of Gaming? Any videos, any articles on the way?
I haven't thought of anything yet, but I'm kind of brainstorming of what I could do. I have a few things in the works that I might bring up.
Yeah, don't rush in, because my first article was a terrible article about a sealed copy of Super Mario Brothers, which is about 2 paragraphs long. It was awful, but it was a good dipping of my toes in, But yeah, don't rush it, whatever you do. So yeah, I honestly do not have something coming up. I'm pretty much focused on the podcast right now. So our next episode, Lauren is going to be on, and we are going to be talking about Castle. That's pretty much my next thing I'm going to plug. My next thing I'm working on is the next episode of the Retro Rumble podcast, which will be next Friday at this time, 9 p.m. GMT, and I think it's 1 p.m. PST, I'm not sure, but 9 p.m. GMT. That will be about a very cool game called Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and a very cool game. So any listeners, we would love your questions, so do send them in. You can send them to Lauren, send them to myself, send them on the Discord. Any questions about Clock Tower, even Castlevania, I know it's a future episode, but whatever. Literally any questions at all about the show or about us or about video games, anything you want us to answer. But ideally about Clock Tower would be cool, and we'll likely read them out on our next episode. So Lauren, once again, thank you for joining me. It was a great chat about
No
Clock Tower.
problem.
I really want to play this game some more, and hopefully I'd like to do like a Let's Play or something like that. That would be pretty cool. So yes, once again, thank you for joining me, and listeners, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.